Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Tome of Knowledge, where we tome your knowledge for you. I don't think that's a verb. It's
Uh,
not.
well, it is now because you
Yeah.
just said it. So
Anything can be a verb if you try hard enough.
yeah, welcome to our knowledge where we cast your cantrips for you.
No, that's Fridays. This is when we cast your cantrips. Speaking of casters and cantrips, thanks for supporting us. Very much appreciated. If you're unfamiliar with our schedule, we have our Tome of Knowledge talks on Monday nights, 6 p.m. Pacific. And Tuesday nights are art times with Bun at 7 p.m. Thursdays are exclusively podcast and YouTube only for out of combat discussions. And then Friday, 6 p.m. is live. We have our live play D&D, which we just finished session 20, which was a doozy. If you haven't caught up, no spoilers.
Yes, go check out them on the podcast or on the YouTubes or the VODs, all that stuff.
Yes, YouTube link is in the appropriate place that you think it might be, depending on where you're watching or listening. Or you can always join a Discord, hang out, talk with us. We've actually today in Discord has been answering some like D&D related questions, trying to spread a little bit of knowledge and stuff. So yeah, one way to get me to respond in Discord is to either post a new like metal video from a metal band I like, or ask a D&D related question. Those are two surefire ways to get me to respond. But anyway,
Join the Discord. Make
join the
Max
Discord.
listen to metal and answering your questions.
Yes. Another important thing. So not this Friday, but next Friday, the 17th of November, same time, 6 p.m. Pacific. But it's going to be over on Obsidian's Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Obsidian, I believe. And we're going to be doing a little one shot over there for their extra live. So go take a look at that. It'll be a nice little quick adventure with the whole crew. Will all be there. I'll be DMing. I'll be live on location.
That'd be fun. I can't wait.
All the code brew.
Be in the spotlight. I was thinking about this, by the way. I was like, you know what? I don't have a laptop. So I'm trying to figure out, like, how am I going to do this? But that's fine. I can figure it out. It'll be okay.
Yeah, we got something. We got you.
Yeah, we'll figure it out. But today's discussion is, if you have seen the title of the stream, also, thank you, Bordicus, for 41 months. Also, thank you, Aeon, for 26 months for resubscribing. Very much appreciated.
Hey.
All of that goes to allowing us to have super cool maps and super cool music during the streams, all that. So we got to pay those artists.
But, yeah, we do. Very important.
Mm-hmm. I might need to do an assessment of all those Patreons that I'm a part of. I'll figure out which ones I'm using and not. But anyway, yeah. The discussion tonight is going to be about Session 0. And if you don't know what a Session 0 is, perfect. You're in the right place, because we're going to tell you all about it.
Mm-hmm. Something that we mention quite often in our other Tome of Knowledge episodes, but we haven't had a dedicated session about it.
Yeah, we were talking about that, and I think collectively we thought, yeah, we had a Session 0 like discussion. Yeah. And I went and looked back at all the podcasts that I was like, I guess we just sprinkled in like 4 different podcasts. Maybe we should have one like dedicated to that.
Yeah, I think we talk about it so much that maybe that's why we all constantly bring up Session 0. But yeah, I was like, yeah, of course we already talked about it. No, yeah. Now it's official. Now it's in the title.
Yeah, it's in the title. It's there. Now I'll know. But so I guess the first thing to cover is like, okay, what is a Session 0? And what I want to hear, I'm going to put you on the spot. Sorry, VS. So think all the way back to campaign 1, pre-campaign 1. And then when we were having you play, that being your first campaign, like what did you think a session 0 was going to cover, or had you heard of it before, or have you known enough about it that you kind of knew what to expect?
I don't think I knew what a session 0 was before playing. I'd not really seen it talked about in any of the D&D media that I was consuming, but I think I mean I think you laid it out pretty well what it was going to be as we were getting closer to it. So I don't know. I just I went in treating it as a learning experience, like pretty much everything else in the first campaign for me. Um, and I guess I didn't realize just how um, important it is for that session to not only understand like setting and get a little bit of world info from you, um, but as we went through it, um, it like made sense almost immediately why it's such an important thing because we did cover a lot, uh, you know, player ground rule stuff,
Yeah.
how we're gonna treat certain mechanics. So I was learning as we went through, and you know, as we got towards the end of it, I was like, okay, like this makes sense. This should happen at the start of every
Yeah.
campaign.
And I think one thing too, which is interesting of why people may not have heard of it, is there's nothing about a session 0 in any of the 5th edition official stuff. It's not mentioned in like the player's handbook or the DMG or any of the future ones that I know of. It might be mentioned anecdotally, but there's not like a specific section. I do know from watching interviews, I think it was Chris Perkins when he was talking about 1D&D. He said that they are going to include a section specifically about session 0 when they re-release the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is good, I think, which is
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, because I mean, prior to that, I mean, I'd been watching like Critical Role, but Critical Role is a very sort of unique situation in that they had already been playing before they ever did the streaming thing, and they were all friends to begin with. So I never saw them talk about anything like a session 0. So, and so it was pretty much brand new for me.
Yeah, and that brings up an important point too. I don't want to get too far ahead. Let me define a session 0 and then remind me about that, about not hearing about it. But basically, like a session 0 is like a collaborative like meeting that's held before you start playing a new campaign. And there's several sort of important purposes that it does, this specific meeting. Like it'll basically introduce like expectations. It'll kind of help set the campaign up for success as a whole. So there's a lot of like pre-campaign discussions that can happen that can kind of shape the kind of game that you want to play. And I'm of the opinion that session 0 shouldn't be recorded or it shouldn't be streamed. And it's interesting because I specifically had some questions because I even had little mini session 0s. I don't know why I did this. I guess this means miniature, little circle, miniature circle that you can look through and see your session 0. But I had questions like, "Hey, are we streaming this?" I was like, "No." Like the thought never occurred to me of why people would want to stream the session 0. But that's just me.
No, I agree because you're talking about things that may be vulnerable to a certain individual that they may or may not want that to be displayed or showcased or put out into the internet or so it's meant for everyone to build that safe space rather than showcase that it can be a safe space.
Yeah, yeah. I totally agree. It's not for me. But if it's different how you want to do it, I mean, more power to you and your table. But that ain't how I run things around here, for me anyway.
Yeah, I like as a concept, it doesn't, in my mind, doesn't lend itself to be good content.
Yeah.
It's literally just a meeting with the players. I
Yeah.
don't see how it could be entertaining for anybody to watch. And like you said, it is a space where people reveal certain vulnerabilities and other things, other concerns that really don't need to be shared with the wider
Maybe
audience.
maybe we're just not made for this age of everything is content these days.
Maybe.
I think one thing too is if you're running a session 0 and you're the DM, like make a checklist because you'll forget shit. Because I usually do. I make like some like high points of things that I want to cover. Like I think that that's important as well. Make sure you cover all the bases and stuff.
Yeah, I think for our first campaign, I know for sure in the second campaign, you came prepared with pretty much like a doc with bullet points.
Yeah, I had one campaign 1 too. And
Yeah.
then I revised it for the second one.
Yeah, this playing with you, Max, and everyone here. This was my first session 0 where it actually went into things like phobias or like I don't
Mhm.
want to see this in the campaign and stuff like that because I've been playing with my other group since high school, so we've known each other our whole lives, so we never really like
Yeah.
we would have session zeros, but those session zeros were like, oh, we're just gonna build characters together and decide who's what classes, who's gonna be what, and
Yeah.
and the DM is basically gonna give like a prologue of like what is to be expected in the story and what's gonna go down. So we never actually like dug deep into like, yeah, are we displaying or showcasing romances or yeah, like if I
Mhm.
have a fear of giraffes, so I don't want any giraffes in the game, stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
a couple campaigns uh with like it was like the same group, but there was like different people where I was forced into relationships where my character I didn't want to do that. So it's just like it got really messy and got really weird and
That's
kind of
icky.
ended the campaign.
That's icky. I don't like
Yeah.
that. um well, that's a good segue into one of the topics that I have specifically. One of like I have several like bullet points of like things. I'll just read the bullet points and then we'll jump into one of them. But I have things like player expectations, like campaign theme and tone, character creation, like house rules, homebrew, the setting, like player backgrounds, like character like bonds and goals, conflict resolution, the pacing and play style, campaign expectations, scheduling, safety, comfort, rules clarification. Those are kind of just the things that I've just sprinkled in there. But I think that's bringing up a good point of like the safety and like comfort aspect of it, since we kind of jumped over into that. And kind of the reason for that are like you did mention, like there are some things that some people like might find uncomfortable. And I think it's important for one, the DM kind of talk about, and these all sort of like are running together a little bit in the different headings and stuff, but to talk about like what's like, how do they run games? Like what's okay, what's not okay, what's the setting like? But you know, for example, um, specifically like with session zeros, I'll write down notes of like, hey, this is the time of like for people like stuff that you don't like, stuff that you don't like want in the game. And it might be a little awkward, but this is kind of the time to bring up the things of like, hey, like an example for us. It's like, hey, like we're playing a campaign and like understand like, hey, there like sexy times could happen in like a role playing moment. But if it does, we're gonna fade to black. We're not gonna go into any of it, and that's gonna kind of be it. Like that's something that we've talked about. Like, hey, like romances are like okay and it can be a compelling story, but we're not gonna go any further than like, okay, that happened. Because that's uncomfortable for a lot of people, and probably not an appropriate place to roleplay that kind of stuff. So yeah, another example is we've mentioned too, and I think Bun, you're really open about it too. Who's in chat there is just like if you have like arachnophobia, right? Anything to do with that, like you can guarantee that if Bun's in a game that we're playing, there's not gonna be any of that stuff. Or like for um others, I've played with someone where it's like, hey, or I think that I've known someone, it's like, hey, like like if someone's a parent, it's like, hey, I don't want like kids to be in like precarious situations, like because maybe they have a young kid and like don't want their like recreational like fun times to have to deal with like kids being in danger like they do in real life. So like that kind of stuff. um but yeah, and it could be anything, right? Anything that you just like don't want to see. um One of the things that I always bring up, I don't even know if you all care about this or not, but and we've kind of discussed this, like character, like pets or like animals, like if y'all have some horses and stuff like that, they're not going to be in combat, but if something happens and y'all screw up, instead of like, oops, all your horses are dead, it's going to be like, oops, you lost your horses and they ran away and they're never coming back. That's kind of a me thing. Like I don't want to like kill a bunch of like pretend horses or like puppies or anything like that. That's not for me either.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's completely understandable. A lot of people get uncomfortable when there's any sort of violence that could be directed towards animals
Mm-hmm.
or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a good point too, Porticus. Like torture, like that's a big negatory that's on the list too. I kept a list of things that we discussed on each like, session 0 and stuff too. So things that you definitely don't want to see.
Yeah. Oh, go
Oh
ahead.
yeah, even like how just even not I want to say mundane thing, but like necessities for the party. Like how is loot being dispersed amongst the parties? That's like a good session 0 thing. Like, are
Mhm.
we doing party loot? Is it okay or not okay to steal stuff from your party members, especially if you have like a shifty rogue in the party? So like a lot of that stuff should be discussed before even starting the game because if it's not, and then you have a player who is either stealing stuff from the players or stealing things without the party's knowledge, that it could definitely lead into
Mhm.
arguments amongst players, not as characters, and then possibly end campaign or people part ways or stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm gonna segue to the conflict resolution topic in just a second. I want to back up for like a little bit. I think it's a great segue. When we're talking about the safety and comfort stuff, addressing like those sensitive topics is important, but it's also important to make sure that people have tools to use that if those things come up, because you can't think of absolutely everything in session 0 that you don't want to see or don't want in your game. And if it does come up, the players have to have a way to indicate like to the DM or to the other players like, hey, I don't want to do this. um it could be like a card that the DM hangs out, like you just raise a card, or like you make an X with your hands, or you could say, hey, move on, make like a silly word like radishes, and everyone knows that means just to keep moving on, like all that kind of stuff. For us being online, it's pretty easy where they can just drop it in like our chat or like DM me and be like, move on, like done with that kind of thing. So but yeah, anyway, I wanted to get that out there to make sure before I forgot it. But you brought up conflict resolution between players. It's a great topic. Like, how do you handle that?
Like adults, I don't know. Communication is probably number one. Communication, being comfortable with want or being able to speak up. I know a lot of I've heard so many stories about people who just like hold their tongue and just kind of like bear through it, and they may or may not bring it up after the fact, or discuss it with another player to avoid confrontation, face to face. Yeah, communication is key, and being comfortable enough to speak up and not fear of any like repercussions or backlash from said group or people.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, kind of kind of touches on the whole goal of getting together and playing the game, right? Is you want to go on an adventure and you want to have a solid time. You want to have fun playing a character, hanging out with hopefully people that you enjoy playing with. And
Hopefully.
so hopefully that's again session 0. Um and so yeah, it can be understandable that somebody might have reservations about speaking up in a certain scenario if they, you know, don't want to ruffle anybody's feathers. But I think session 0 is where you kind of gotta
Hmm.
be able to understand like when these things come up. Here's how you guys can deal with it. Discuss, you know, ways to bring things up, like you said, safe words, or maybe just be like, hey, look, if at the end of the session something happens, uh, tell me and we can resolve it. Like, just make it known that you can hash things out in a constructive way and without like pissing somebody off or hurting
Hmm.
somebody's feelings. So
Yeah. And there's some questions in the chat about player expectations. So I think that we can segue to that. So I think player expectations is kind of a two-way street. Like what the players are expecting out of the game, and also what the DM expects of the players too, and what the players expect from the other players. So some of the things that I had as for examples, and this is kind of on a DM side. It's like, how do you feel about like, hey, can we have drinks during the game? Like people like get high and play. Like can like is that cool? Is that not cool for the game? Um, Other things you could talk about like are like unannounced dice rolls. If someone just rolls, you know, just to roll and says, "Oh, I'm doing this," like, is that okay from the DM's perspective? Um, how are like player absences handled? If someone's not there, does someone else play their character? Do they just get kind of hand waved? Does the DM play their character? Like that kind of stuff. Those are
Yeah,
some
all
examples.
all valid because like there was a situation where a player was gone, but the DM took control, and that character fell in battle, and that player wasn't even there to experience. So those can be very negative experiences, like causing a person to never want to come back because something happened to their character and that was completely out of their control. So yeah, all those
Mhm.
things are important to talk about.
Yeah. That's why I just hand wave and say they're there, but they're not there because I don't want to play somebody else's character.
Yeah.
yeah, as
Uh,
comfortable as I am with all of us that play in our game, I don't know if I would want the added pressure
Yeah.
of, especially if we know or if we get the feeling that session could be particularly combat heavy or something. It's just like, nah, I don't know. Their character's their character. They have their motivations that I'm not aware of. So
Mhm.
yeah, definitely good stuff to iron out in a session 0 setting.
yeah,
Yeah.
Village asks about like if someone wants to be a jerk character, is the group fine with that? Yeah, it comes down to communication and what the party agrees uh what's going to happen in the game. So if everyone's fine that that person is a jerk character, then at the start, then that's okay. But it could lead to issues later on once the like people actually play the game and interact with their characters amongst another. So it could lead into some bad territory.
Yeah. For sure. And I think, and this is where kind of like the lines are blurred between these like arbitrary topics that I put on my notepad. But some of y'all asked are like, okay, what if like everyone wants to play paladins and like one person wants to play like an asshole? Because that's a class apparently, a level 5 asshole. I think that kind of runs into like the campaign theme and the tone and like character creation stuff a little bit. So if you jump over to like the campaign theme and tone, it's like, okay, well, what's this campaign about? What kind of campaign do you want to run? Like what's the world like? You know, are we playing like high fantasy? Are we playing like a political intrigue game? Are we doing like grimdark or like gritty realism type stuff? Those questions will come up and kind of flavor what kind of characters people will want to play. And that's also kind of, you can also talk about some specific topics. It could lead into like the campaign like theme or like what the world is like. What were you gonna say, Mibs?
I agree.
I thought you were gonna say something. I thought I talked over you.
No. No, I don't know what I'm gonna say. Just filling space.
Okay.
I'll say that for me, especially in our first campaign, having received knowledge of like what the general world is going to be like, and you know, sort of what style of campaign we're shooting for, really helped me to kind of decide what my first character was going to be. Um, it I don't know if that's, I'm sure there's other people that are the same way, that want to wait and see um kind of what the scenario is going to be before they decide, but I know other people have like a list of different characters that they want to pull out and use no matter what. But um yeah, even stuff like that can be super helpful for certain players at the table, to be able to kind of give them the push that they need to iron out something that they want to try, or race that they want to play, or you know, what type of personality they want to go for. Yeah, it's extremely helpful to folks like me.
Yeah, and even going like what you're saying into like the setting of like introducing the world a little bit more, less about like the meta, like the theme, but also like a quick like little primer on what the world is. I know in campaign 2 I wrote like a little one pager of info of like, here's the world, here's the places, here's some main players, here's like a quick blurb about, you know, each of the different city states, like just a little quick thing. I wouldn't go longer than like a page if you're a DM, because they're not going to read it. If you give them your dissertation on your homebrew world, they're not going to care.
Primers are very important to me because I typically don't have a character idea until I hear about the world or having a little synopsis, because I want to build a character I want to play within this world, rather than just like, I have this min max build and I'm gonna blow shit up and I don't care what the world setting is. But um I want to know more about the world to have more heavily influence on what I want to make in the group. And also my influence is, and this is good for like session 0, asking what people want to play, because I tend to kind of do a backfill. I was like, oh, they want to play this, then I'll play this and still have fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's where you can tie into like player backgrounds and how they fit into the story. There's even some people that will take a session 0 and that's where they'll create characters for the game. I don't do that personally, because I take a long time for myself to make a character and I don't want to put anybody on the spot for like X amount of time, because what I
That
think
wouldn't work for me.
yeah, because we set aside like what, like an hour for our session 0, and I think we went like an hour and a half or more. Like it, no matter how much time you set aside is not enough for session 0.
Yeah, I think I
Yeah,
had Oh, sorry.
No, go for it. Yes.
I was gonna say just on the character stuff. I think as we were getting closer to campaign 2 and prior to having our session 0, I had like 3 or 4 different character ideas in my head, but it wasn't until we had session 0 that I was actually able to narrow it down, and
Mhm.
it also helped inform a lot of my character's backstory based on like sort of the locations that Max revealed to us. So yeah, it's very,
Yeah.
very useful.
No,
Mhm.
it's a great opportunity for players to ask DMs a ton of questions to
Yeah.
help better
Mhm.
inform the character they want to make, and just like for backstory purposes, what race you want to be. Because like, oh, we're inhabiting this campaign is going to take on this continent. Are what's the population like? So that helps inform what kind of race you want to be, perhaps,
Mhm.
or even like, is there uh established religion? So depending, so if you want to play a divine character, that can determine what pantheon you want to pursue or follow.
Mhm.
And I know we talked about for campaign 2 because we didn't do this campaign 1, but we're like, oh, it'd be really nice if we had a free feat at level 1 because it
Mhm.
was really hard to kind of get an idea what our character wants to our career character growth for the future. So having
Mhm.
so we decided like, all right, we'll have a free feed at level 1, which was super nice. And then
Yeah.
we also discussed about, are we doing brutal crits or are we doing normal crits? So we opted for brutal crits where the first set of dice is maximized and then you roll the second set.
Mhm.
So like a
Yeah.
lot of mechanical stuff uh
Yeah,
is good for session 0 as well.
sort of homebrew rules for like when you can use healing potions and other
Yeah.
sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah, because we covered both like character creation and like house rules and stuff. So for like character creation, you mentioned like what races you want to play and stuff like that. There's also a list. Like I had some restrictions. I was like, hey, you can't play these. If you really, really, really want to, we can talk about it, but it's gonna have to be like a compelling reason of why you want to play this specific type of like race. And then there, I gave them the restrictions about sort of the magic users and like what this world is like, and like to arcane users and like what does an arcane user mean? What classes are those? Like that kind of stuff was all session 0. As well, you mentioned the Pantheon. I gave you little tidbits of that too in the session 0. And then like what you were saying, VS and moves with like the house rules and stuff. We talked about like the criticals, like healing potions, like bonus action stuff. We talked about death saves, where I think where like natural one doesn't suck anymore. We made the decision this campaign that everyone's gonna roll for HP
Yep.
this time. We talk about like how players can get inspiration, like what it means like to get inspiration, um, other stuff like that. We kind of cover all the mechanical bits in there too. Good question from Village. Go ahead, Moobs. I'll answer her question after your thought.
Yeah, I thought.
See,
I wasn't
I
trying
was
to
like,
say
I'm
anything.
waiting.
I don't know what happened. I'm sorry. I must be doing like a facial thing where I'm like taking a breath, and they're like, "Oh, Moose wants to say something."
Well, I hear like the little thing, like the when someone like get ready to like kind of opens their mouth if they're going to
Yeah, yeah.
talk. So I think you're going to say something, and I'm like, oh, back it up. But Village is saying is how do you handle session 0 with like guest appearances because the party's established, but there's a new player. So what I do is like we'll say for example like when Erock uh like joined us for those guest sessions, like I brought up like, hey, here's like the session 0 documentation that I gave them. Here's like all of the extra stuff. Here's all the things. Kind of give them like a brief overview of like here's what was mentioned, and like is there anything that you want to add to that particular to you? And a lot of times, since it's going to be like a few episodes or so, most of the time it's really just kind of asking like back and forth questions about the world, or like, hey, where do you think I could fit in the narrative since you're kind of getting dropped in like and pulled out. But that's kind of how I handle that. Is I'll either give them like a doc, or I'll make a custom one and say, hey, here's like all the links that you need. Here's where you need to make your character, like all that stuff that the players already know. But Borticus is not wrong. They're a chaos injector. There's no telling what'll happen with a new character kind of dropped in.
Yeah, in our case, it led to a whole quest line that kind of gave us some direction, plot wise, which was nice.
Mm-hmm.
I would say we do a pretty good job when we are selecting someone to make a guest appearance on the show. Like we make sure we know them. It's not like they're vetted. Of course,
It's a
like the people we've had play with are already amazing, decent people. So we haven't had any issues so far of like, hey, and we invite a guest and it turns into like a huge nightmare. So fortunately, we haven't had any issues like
God.
that so far.
There's a rigorous pre-screening process with a 300 multiple choice questionnaire and
They have to
an oral
provide their
review.
social security number,
Um,
driver's license.
You have to take a
yeah,
personality test.
yeah, but no, it's not all the players and then the DM and the new person. Typically, honestly, because of scheduling concerns, like, and probably usefulness. I don't know if everyone needs to be there for a guest that's gonna like be there for a few episodes and then be out. Now, if it was like a situation where they're gonna be there for like the remainder or something like that, then yeah. And kind of what Bordicus mentioned earlier is that like you have a session 0 doesn't mean it's the end. Like keep bringing it up, keep talking about it. You know, case in point, when y'all got your boat, which was early on enough about that, it was just like, hey, how do you want to play this? Like, and we've talked a little bit about this before. It's like on a scale of pirates, do you want like Muppet Treasure Island or like Black Sails? Like what kind of pirates do you want to be? Like, do you want to like do all of the crunchy numbers and math, and do you want to account for like everything, like that kind of stuff?
Yeah. How in depth do you want to go with operations of your ship if you get one,
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing?
Yeah.
If someone's really into project management and wants to micromanage the ship and the crew and their salaries and their fee, then more power to that person. But
I'm
our whole group were like
Mm-hmm.
as little as possible, but enough where we can interact with the crew.
It
Yeah.
could, in the right group, it could make for an interesting campaign where it's less focused on like grand adventure and more focused on your ship crew. You're either a pirate crew or otherwise, and the sessions are like ship on ship battles where things are popping
Mm-hmm.
off, and it's like you have to command crew and everyone has a job. I can see that for certain types of players, that would be a pretty awesome campaign.
Yeah. Like resource management, like survival type elements and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it just depends on your
skill
group, and
challenges.
which is why I brought it up and asked everybody. I even um I made a what was it, a Google form a questionnaire
Yeah,
that I
you
sent to
did, yeah.
everybody. I took that right out of Bordicus's book. So thank you for that, Bordicus. In previous games I've played with him, I think it can be helpful. Oh no, I helped. Yeah. Yeah, and another thing too is like if you're a new DM and like you've probably played enough games, like take the stuff that you like. It's all a big like collaborative like thing. Like if you like a certain style, like hey, I'm gonna use that and like make your own, especially for session zeros, as I'd been part of different session zeros. I was like, well, I don't necessarily want to do that, but I do like these discussions, and kind of just meld your own together. Make it happen.
Royalty. Oh my.
What's that? Royalties? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have a trademark on forms. All D&D questionnaires belong to Bordicus.
Yeah. They have to go through Bordicus though. Gotta prove
Yeah.
every single one.
You have to approve every single questionnaire.
Yeah.
God. That
Yeah.
would be awful. What are some other things? We've talked about homebrew. We've talked about like campaign setting. You can go into like the pacing and like the play style. because we have some differing opinions in our group of like what they want. Like, do your players want to do like combat heavy, all combat all the time, kill stuff, get loot? Is it like I want to like role play and a political intrigue type thing and be intricately woven into the politics of your world? Like, it's important to discuss that too, of like what kind of game do you want to play?
Yeah. It's probably one of the most important topics, I think, going in. Because we definitely have some different desires as players within our own group. Some of us don't mind a little bit of everything. Others might not be into so many sessions of RP. They want to get to some action. So very, very important session 0 topic to discuss is what's our campaign going to play like?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough. It's a very tough job for the DM, and Max, you do a fantastic job. Because I think our group, we all agree that we all like role playing. But some people like combat more than role playing, or just like, okay, role playing's good, but let's spice it up with some combat so it's not 100% role playing.
Mhm.
And then there's people who love lore and want to learn more about the world and what's going on and the insides and out of everything. So I think, yeah, it's a tough job for the DM to balance all that out to make sure everyone is satisfied and happy playing.
Max, you've mentioned before that at least as a player, you don't like puzzles,
Fucking hate him.
right? So that's another thing, like that's kind of attached to this, where it's like, okay, we have a party that likes a mix of everything, but most of the players aren't into like thinking puzzles. So then the DM will know to either not have them at all or to keep them like few and far between if that's
Mhm.
not what the party wants. So
Yeah. And a little bit off topic, but important. If your players like puzzles, and I'm not kidding, go look up puzzles for like elementary students, like third graders, because there's something weird about like puzzles and like riddles when you're playing D&D, because like there's that extra like layer of abstraction where you're not solving a puzzle, your character's solving a puzzle, you're not in the room, you're hearing about it from your DM. And I've found that like that's like the appropriate level to like start and then like branch off from there. I don't know why it is, but it works because you don't want your players to spend 3 hours getting frustrated and not solving a puzzle, but you don't want them to like walk all over it. So that's, I don't know why, but that's kind of what I'd start with and go from there.
Yeah, start somewhere.
Yeah.
I test the waters and see how smart your players are.
I don't think it's about intelligence. I just think that there's something weird with you're not the person in the dungeon looking at the floor tiles and the markings on the ceiling, and just that little bit of like barrier, like once removed, makes it weird for people.
yeah,
I don't know why. That's just my experience.
yeah, and a lot of it kind of falls on the DM to, without spelling things directly out for the player, trying to direct them and keep them on like a path as they're, because I know different tables could spend just hours and hours like, I think we should do this, and or no, but the puzzle says that, or what did the guy say before? And you can just get locked in an endless like analysis loop among players. So
I like to, yeah, like conversational cul-de-sac is what I
yeah,
call it. We have that in our session 0 a little bit to kind of help curtail some of that, where we talk about like out of character talk, you know,
Oh yeah.
like the what our group does is like we use as like little out of character talk as possible, because I've found that when people start speaking like meta about the game instead of being in the game and talking about it, it creates those kind of analysis paralysis, like what you were saying, VS, uh, of like not making decisions, but kind of leaning into like your character and speaking as your character. For some reason, people tend to make decisions faster and don't talk about making decisions.
Yeah,
Gun says,
it's different for us too, I think, because
Yeah.
we're a live show. So we can't. You're just like, what's the first thing my character thinks of, and that's what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Gun says that I used to have a minute timer I kept to move those times along. You could you could do that for sure. I know I think you've done some timed puzzles for us where like something's happening and we're on like a time crunch to kind of like push
Yeah.
things along.
I think having a timer in my DMing style, having a timer is great if used sparingly, because
Yeah.
when you introduce it, it stresses everyone the fuck out immediately.
Because
You're locked in a room and there's gas coming in. Solve it.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's one of those things. And it might be, if you set up um in your session 0, it's like, hey, if you want quick snappy stuff, you could say, hey, every time it's your turn, I'm going to turn the hourglass over, and when it's done, you make a decision. Like, that's a thing that you could do if everyone agrees to it. Like, that's definitely like, use all the tools in your toolbox. I just know that I want to say I've used it 2 times out of 2 campaigns, maybe, with the
Yeah, it has
timer.
been.
that sounds right.
I
Yeah.
think it's 2 times. And with our group, when I have used it, everyone's like, oh my God, the sky's falling. We got to go. It creates panic.
Yeah, I know. I remember very vividly for campaign 1 is when we were underwater with the hags and they were filling the cave up with water. And we
Yeah.
were like, oh shit,
I knew there was
time
one in
to
campaign 1.
go.
I just
Yeah.
yeah, that was
So we
frightening.
almost lost Bryn. Bryn almost drowned.
Yeah. I don't know if I remember the other one though. We can talk about it offline.
Mm.
I just don't remember. But yeah, a good tool to put in your toolbox. But yeah, something else to put in your session 0. Let me think. Is there anything else we haven't necessarily discussed? Ooh, scheduling and commitment. That's important too to talk about in your session 0. Like, how often are you going to play? What night are you going to play? What time is it going to be? Like, that kind of stuff, and setting up expectations. And like, for ours, like, that was an important factor of like discussing, like, even if they wanted to join, the campaign. It's like, okay, like, when do you play? What time is it? How long do these things go for? That kind of
Oh, yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, and since we're a streaming show, we don't all live in the same
Mhm.
state. There's time zones to account for, and so yeah.
I mean, Nina's in a whole different continent. So
It's,
it's the
I
future
mean,
for her.
it's like lunchtime and we're done. For her,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, I gotta get some lunch.
Yeah.
We're already like, all right, we're gonna shower and go to bed.
Yeah, and then poor VS, it's like 1 a.m. when we're done. He's right.
Well, yeah. But it's a Friday, so
Mhm.
we're chilling.
Yeah. So yeah, which that factors into like the date, because like ain't no way we're playing on like a Tuesday, right? That ain't gonna work.
I'm crazy, so I probably could
I
do it. But
I love D&D, so I'd do it. But
yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of my thing. Is like, I'm crazy enough to do it, but I don't think everyone has various levels of I don't know what to call it. Various levels of, I don't know, how far they want to go. Yeah, availability is good.
Yep. Everybody's got stuff going on.
I think we touched about this in the beginning about if you whether you should record session 0 or not, but, like, just the whole experience as a whole, like, all right, is this gonna be live streamed? Is this gonna be recorded and edited and put on YouTube? As just like a closed door thing, and it's just friends hanging out and playing the game, like, those things you should consider in session 0 as well.
Yeah, because their decisions are different based on like if you are going to stream or put it on the internet for sure. Because it might be okay at your table if you're playing 12-hour D&D sessions, it might be okay to have a 3-hour puzzle. For how we play on stream, no, that's not for us.
Man, playing D&D for 12 hours sounds fun.
Man,
Like
back
a
when I was
whole
in
day of it.
college and no responsibilities, it was amazing. It was the greatest experience ever.
It's like I think like at this point in my life, the idea of it sounds great, and then like actually doing it would be a different experience for me.
I think if it was, like, we talked to a friend over the weekend, and they rented out a cabin because this is the finale of the campaign, and they made it a whole weekend of awesome fun times and snacks and meals and just hanging out, and so, yeah, it's a for those situations, I think that would be super rad.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true.
Who
Good point,
knows?
Bort. Offline involvement should be discussed. Like if people want to like role play in like Discord, or if it's too much of a hassle, or like what. Yeah, that's good too. And I also very much encourage the players to talk outside of on stream. It's like, hey, what do you want to do? Like, what are your ideas? Like, where are you going? Like, what interests you? Having them like formulate some ideas of like where things are going next helps me too.
Yeah, our player Discord is nothing until like Thursday or Friday, and then it's everybody's typing. What do we do? What do we do?
Y'all can't do that this time. Please don't.
We
We got too
gotta
much
we
shit to
gotta
talk about.
we gotta do this super fast, super not super fast, but super early.
Yeah. Yeah. Um yeah, definitely a great point of like expectations outside the game and stuff like that. And also remember that like not all problems are solved in game. Some of them are discussed outside of game too. You know, have mechanisms in place, like when we talked about like conflict resolution earlier. If someone has issues or something, like if the DM can set up a mechanism and like directly tell people how to handle this stuff and how to bring it up, and that will help too.
Yeah, and don't be afraid to have like little mini session zeros throughout the campaign. If as a party, you feel like you're kind of grinding to a halt and need some direction, it's a good idea to have a meeting to talk about it, or if there is issues that come up, maybe even just for a particular session, doing like a little after the game player meeting is always good. So session 0, great at the start. Don't be afraid to have more of them as the campaign goes along.
Yeah. Me touched on something, a little bonus thing here that's not to do with session 0, but like kind of little after every session we have a little discussion. That's usually like between like 10 to 15 minutes. I've heard it called Roses and Thorns, Stars and Wishes, all that stuff, where we talk about like what did we like about like the game, what did we not like, what do we want to change, what's not working, that kind of stuff. And then that way there's like a mechanism where there's a constant check-in. We know that after the session we're going to talk about things. And I think that it makes it easier for people to bring things up because we have a dedicated time that like, hey, we're going to talk about things. Because I know for some people, if they have an issue and there's not a built-in mechanism for it, it's harder for them to bring it up. You know, like maybe they don't want to like try and rock the boat. Maybe they don't want to think that they're a problem or something like that. So it's something to consider too.
Yep, don't let things dogpile. Get it out of the way as they come up.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah.
Again, about having fun.
Yeah. Good point from Aeon about having sessions discuss spells when something seems broken or stuff like that. Yeah, not everyone's an expert and has an immediate answer. And kind of what we've talked about too is like, hey, if there's like a rules discussion or like a question about how things should work, typically how I'll rule it is if I don't know it immediately and I can't find it like in like a few seconds, then I'll just say, hey, I'm gonna rule it this way, and then I'm gonna go, dig into the archives afterwards and figure out like the answer it's supposed to be. So we've kind of adopted that where I'm gonna rule right now, but it doesn't mean it's gonna be that same thing every time afterwards.
Yep.
But because
I
there's
think.
oh
Oh, if you're gonna do follow up, I was just gonna say I think if that's it and there's no other questions,
yeah, I was just commenting about because there's a lot of weirdly worded shit in D&D, especially and like a lot of
Oh, yeah.
nuance and a lot of things that don't line up, so it's really hard to interpret some of that stuff sometimes. But yeah, I think it's a good coverage. Does anyone have any other questions about Session Zero? Something we may not have covered that you want to know? Maybe a question we might have missed. And that goes to those of you that are watching later or listening later. If you have questions, join our Discord. Jump on over to the Tabletop Games channel and just start asking stuff. Tons of people in there that are willing to help and discuss, including me, because I'll talk about D&D all day.
Real quick, Boricus makes a good point. He said, I think it's important to also acknowledge that Session Zero is allowed to fail. You might discover stuff that makes it clear that this group of players won't work together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big one. Again, yeah, hopefully you're playing with people who are your friends and you've known for a while. Yeah, but if you're a new group or if you're an old group and you have some new members, like Session Zero is definitely a powerful tool to see what the potential outlook of the campaign will be moving forward.
Yeah. And it's okay. It's okay if the style of game that everyone wants to play and you don't want to play it, you don't have to suffer through it. Be like, I'm good. I'll play a different game with some other people. Like bad D&D is not better than no D&D. Trust me. Find a group that aligns with your goals and what you want to do.
We could definitely do a horror story topic in the future. Like bring everybody on or whoever has stories to tell.
Yeah.
Good topic idea.
I can't think of like a Session
Any more of
Zero
those?
bad time.
By the way, so folks listening or watching, please comment topics for us because it's getting a little thin lately for
Yeah,
topics.
we have to come up with some more topics. Bud had a great idea of looking at some of the D&D kind of like horror stories and shit shows on Reddit, and then kind of talking about going through other people's stories, whether it was right or wrong, and what will we do, that kind of thing. But yeah, if you have other topics, other questions, let us know. Otherwise, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. And you don't have to do this stuff in a vacuum. Ask people for help. Join the Discord. There's plenty of like Session Zero checklists that people have already made that are on the internet that are for free for you to just have. If this is like your first time or your 20th time and you want a checklist, they're out there. So anyway, that's all I got, y'all. Thanks for being here. Tomorrow, Art with Bun, 7 p.m. Pacific. Thursday, Out of Combat. Go watch that one if you're caught up. And then Friday, episode 21. So we will see you all there. Have a fantastic night. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
See ya.